Hello,
Hello,
I'm Jelelle.
and I'm Gabriel.
This is actually our first Divine Self Embodiment podcast. And our intention is to offer these every week. And sometimes I'll be hosting and I'll have Gabriel or Kasha or Rihanna or others join me. And sometimes maybe you and Kasha will have one. But really, this is so that we can bridge you to this work and this way of life that we offer called Divine Self Embodiment. And sometimes, if you're just scrolling on social media, you see a post of ours or you watch a video, you may not have the bigger framework or sense of what we're offering here or our experience with it. So this allows us to have a space and a platform to share about that. And I believe that that will be helpful to those of you who are drawn.
Mm-hmm. And it's quite a large thing. I mean, it's kind of a full enchilada,
Yeah.
really. So when we say divine self-embodiment, there's that inevitable question of, well, what is that? And then all of a sudden becomes this sort of weird pretzel inside of like, well, how do I answer that in like a very succinct way? And it's challenging to do that. And so I think this podcast can allow the space to sort of answer that question in a really holistic way.
And what we mean by that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, should we start there?
Yeah.
The elevator
That's
question.
That's right. That's why we're here.
So, Gabriel, what is divine self-embodiment?
That's a hot question.
To you.
To me, it's interesting because there's the three words, we've talked about this before, the divine, self, and embodiment. And that's really a question of, for me, years ago, feeling the sort of the spiritual awakening that I had early on through sort of more kind of I would say, drug-based awakening, you could say, that popped me open into sort of the spiritual realm. I felt very kind of 3D in my thinking, focus, going to school, trying to, get a career, all those sort of things. And then those experiences at that time popped open into this new world of spirituality that really wasn't a part of my growing up, my raising. There wasn't a religious family at all, really. And so spirituality was not really a part of my raising, my conditioning. And so I think there was that opening to that, but then once opening into the sort of the spiritual realm, recognizing that there's a whole there's a whole list of things going on in my self, inside of my own body, inside of my own psychology, inside of my emotional body, all these things.
Inside of your soul.
Yeah, right. Well, there's definitely all that soul awakening that was happening too, like feeling all of those things, but then also there was something else vibrating on the edges that felt more like here and now. And that's where the self piece came in, of wanting to feel like what's going on with this person here that I was at the time. So it felt like both of them were kind of in sort of this, I don't know what you would say. It's kind of like a battle between each other, like the divine, the soul piece, and the self piece were in this sort of like, I don't know, it just felt like a big tangle mess. And none of it felt embodied. Like it felt like it was all kind of out here. It was all in the emotional sort of like out in this sort of area, but nothing ever felt embodied. Like it just didn't feel like I didn't feel in my own skin. And if I were to say what embodiment is, it was a sense of feeling like I'm in my own skin, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, that I'm here, present now in the body. Rather than sort of off transcendent or in my head thinking about something in a more philosophical kind of way, which is what I tended to do. Once awakening to that, it became much more philosophical and conceptual, yeah. Right. So then it's playing all around here, but then recognizing all of the other emotional and psychological stuff was happening in here too. Whether it was anxiety, depression, fear, judgment, all of those things were happening also inside the body. Whether it through increased heart rates, just the jittery anxiousness of being in relationship with people, in conflict, all those sort of like what I would call human sort of things And I could try to stretch it out into the more spiritual divine thing, but that never really was really answering that. Wasn't answering those things that were going on in the emotional body. So to me, divine self-embodiment is taking all of that, that connection to the soul, the connection to the human heart, and really bringing it into the here and now, and being present to it. To me, embodiment is more presence in many ways. It's just being in here, in the moment, in the reactions, in the joy, in the grief, in the bliss, in the mess, as we've called it before, where you're just sort of sorting through a lot. And so it is all happening here and now. And so I think it's taking all of that, and the embodiment is just the intersection of both of those.
And the main way that we work with that or go into that is through a differentiation and individuation process with parts of ourselves and soul aspects as well from other lifetimes, timelines. You want to talk about that too, and how you, because you described kind of almost the process or the end result,
Mm-hmm.
but then there's sort of the how
Right.
piece of it. And so, yeah, if you could say more about that.
So, at the time of the sort of spiritual awakening, there's all the soul threads that are going on, all these sort of like wide angle lens sort of things that are going on. And then, of course, there's all the other, 3D sort of issues going on that I mentioned prior, but they're all kind of a tangled web. It's all kind of I called it a spaghetti pretzel, and it's all just kind of like just garbled. And so the differentiation process is just like taking one of those threads and then pulling it out, mm-hmm. and then feeling what that thread is and pulling that thread out, and really just kind of like taking that big sort of knot that's going on and just kind of taking all of those threads to feel like, what does this thread particularly, how's this affect me right now? What is it doing to create any kind of suffering in my life? So for example, if I'm feeling depression, there was a soul piece around what we would call the gatekeeper, which is sort of this more soul guardian piece. And so that's the aspect of us that lives in kind of this between the spirit and the material world. And so trying to reconcile, being of one, but kind of being, quote, stuck here in that sort of dimensional frequency. So there's a depression there around that soul aspect, but then there's also like an inner teenager who is more like 3D based, who's kind of depressed because life has just not exactly turned out the way that he thought it would be. He doesn't feel free.
That teenager doing art in your bedroom, you wrote about that recently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So kind of like just feeling that teenager, then became a dad very quickly, so became a father. So then all of a sudden, all those became an adult so fast. So trying to catch up with adulthood. So there's depression in that aspect. So there's this more like 3D aspect, inner teenager. Then there's this huge soul aspect of a gatekeeper. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting, even those two pieces kind of come together and they intersect somewhere where the gatekeeper's actually got some connection with the inner teenager. So then you've got this intersection between those two. So there's this interesting thing that happens when you start to pull those threads out, and you can start feeling what's happening with these aspects, and you can start to like help connect to even wider things, even connect to the divine, to help the aspects such as the gatekeeper or the inner teenager find its own healing, find its peace, find where it belongs and its own expression, so that it starts to integrate, become more embodied and rather than disembodied.
Initiated by the soul. Mm-hmm. As well.
Right.
So you're really speaking to, and this is one of the things I love about this process, is you're really speaking to a bridging and an accepting of the soul and the self. Mm. So these parts, like an inner teenager, can be so bypassed or rejected, or I've heard from people sometimes, I don't want to go back there. I don't want to do therapy. I don't want to, go into my wounds or my trauma. But what you're describing, and I feel how we hold it, is that it is very relevant to awakening. It isn't just psychology or therapy. It's really the transmutation, the transformation that happens with a part like a teenager that becomes, for the feminine, it's usually like the maiden of the soul. For the men, I think it's a page, an acolyte, mm-hmm. You called it the shepherd.
Yeah, we've been feeling into the shepherd.
I'm feeling into what to call
There's so
it.
many different.
But there's a direct correlation between the two, and I think this is where we've expanded it out beyond just a therapeutic framework of fixing something or healing something, but really to look at the continuity of the soul. Is what you're speaking to.
Yeah, it's interesting because to have both in the field at the same time is quite an interesting sensation, because we tend to get so wrapped up in either the psychological or the spiritual, and then yet we tend not to see that they're both integrally intertwined somehow. And so it's in that intersection between those two that things get really sort of, it expands something. It creates, again, this wide angle lens of sort of like that question of why am I here sort of feeling sometimes. That was one that I had many years ago before starting this work. You just walk around. I know many people have that feeling of like, why am I here? What am I doing here? What's my purpose?
Why am I awakening? Because there can be quite a suffering relationship to awakening, and you spoke to it because you have not only, what I notice and have experienced myself is that awakening actually backlights the wounding. So rather than making it all go away and you're just going to transcend into bliss and oneness, maybe some souls do, but for most of us it actually backlights, and the things that we haven't felt and haven't been able to feel. I think that's an important point too, in other lifetimes. So there's a way that the psychology, the therapy is leading us into new territories where we can feel things about. An example I use is like what it actually feels like emotionally and relationally to be a priestess in Avalon, for example, or to have gone through the collapse of Lemuria and Atlantis. So rather than just looking at it from a spiritual lens, if you bring in the emotional and the psychological and the parts as well, that's the place where embodiment lives. To me, that's where embodiment can happen, right? Where we're speaking of a conceptual or a pureness. A non-relationality is another word that we use. How would you describe non-relationality versus intimate relationality with yourself, with others, with the divine?
I would say for me personally, it lives in where you could feel the energy more in your head. For me, that's the way I've always felt it. Like it just lives sort of mentally as conceptually out here. And to me, that relational piece lives more in the heart, in the chest area. It's just a different energetic to me. Like I can feel it. Obviously, I'm out here talking, so I'm a little bit more up here than I am down here. But then when you move from the head to the heart, there is something that happens like energetically.
And you can't, how do you reach the parts? It's not through the head.
Right. Yeah. Though, I mean, we're using the head, the imagination part of it to go connect. We can visit a part of us in the bedroom, in a location or wherever that, let's say we're just use inner teenager for an example, or even a gatekeeper. Inner teenager could be in sort of a bedroom somewhere. They could be in a location that they remember being very joyful or very painful. It's a location. Any different than a gatekeeper. I mean, I've met mine in some sort of high, lofty mountain area overlooking, vast lands and that sort of thing. Very sort of epic kind of geography in that way. And so in that context, we are using kind of the mind to create the vision, kind of like the what do they call it in Star Trek, the holodeck kind of thing. But then once you actually go and you go meet that aspect or that part, then you can start feeling the emotional vibration of it. You can feel the inner teenager in its sadness, in its rage, in its frustration, longing, loneliness. You can feel the gatekeeper in its sort of like confusion, its depression, it's all whatever the expressions of some gatekeepers are. it vibrates, then it starts to vibrate down deeper into the body. And you can feel all of those feelings coming in. Then, now it's going up from conceptual and image-based,
And
and now it's
perhaps
locked in.
non-relational then is there.
Right.
And
And
then
even
the
talking.
relationship happens in the heart.
Yeah. And you
in
can
the
feel
feeling.
that. Right. Yeah. Because I remember times where I'd drop in to my teenager and then start listening to music from that time, anything that would kind of remind him of something or felt good. And I remember just driving the car, being in connection with my inner teenager in that emotional sense, and then just having tears, like just driving my car, and could feel him just weeping, and he's weeping through me.
Music is a powerful portal that way.
Right.
Sound is sound.
Yeah. And that's then we're in relationship to each other. I'm feeling him, and he's feeling me, feeling him, and so then there is that, and so then I think in terms of when you're in relational space with someone, let's say in community, we could even say, like, when we're having a conversation, it's like, oh, we're getting a little mental here, and there's nothing wrong. It's not a judgment on that. It's just hasn't been dropped down. And then it's like even saying, like, I feel like a little frustration going on, or I feel a little bit of tiredness, or just even asking those questions brings it into a relational field that brings it down here.
So I have to ask, what is then the challenge about that? I think especially if you could just speak to for the masculine, it's very general, but what's the challenge about that kind of relationality, intimacy of self, but then how that extends to others as well?
Yeah. I think the challenge is being seen. I think there's a part, it's
the
very
protection,
the protection.
protector.
Yeah. I think there's always going to be the mask that comes up, some kind of protection, some kind of mask that comes up. And then being in that sort of relational, intimate space, really vibrates what we thought we were and what we thought was true, and whatever we've identified ourselves to be. And so whatever the identity is, kind of slowly you find out that that's not exactly what I am in the moment. I'm actually this over here. And then what does that mean? And so then that you're just dropping into something a little bit more real. And I think that's the fear of just actually getting real.
Do you think, again, we're being general, but is there more fear of that for the masculine? Protector usually in our experience is a masculine energy, even for women.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's not a sense of like knowing, for me, it's this kind of it's not uncharted territory, but it is sort of it brings up a vibration about being in control, having it all together. There is a sense of something kind of coming apart, something collapsing. And that for the masculine, there is such a need to hold things together, like a real sort of like this almost a collective need in some ways, or even what's the word I'm looking for? Evolutionary need. I don't know, whatever that is. It's like just something in the masculine collective trying to hold something together. Where in the feminine, it feels like they're more collectively, or just in the feminine principle itself, is used to things falling away, but knowing that they're still there. There's still something there holding the space, and that could be a womb thing. We can come back to that as an example of, like, monthly we're talking about shedding and letting go, and we're just to go into that is not something that men experience. There's not something about letting something go, but there's still something holding the space. There is something that is challenging for us so we build something, and then if it collapses, then what's left? There's a void space.
There's so many, it seems, people, but men who are awakening, the collapse is just happening. It feels like that for a phase, like life is doing it to you in a way. So there's sort of this theme of things falling away, previous identities, whether it's occupation or career or family relationships. Money earning is a big one that can kind of fall away. So then how would you be with that falling away? In a feeling way,
Oh, in an emotional way, yeah. I think
in
there's
a divine self-embodiment way.
yeah. I think there's feeling for an example, I can use myself as an example. Like, I teach English online to support what we do here as just another means of income generation. Um, and when you could start to feel things shifting in that way, where I'm losing students and all that stuff.
There's
And
an ebb and flow.
there's an ebb and flow to it, and there's that losing of something, the income, we just call it that. And there's this, you can feel the constriction. There's a vibration inside my field around it. I can feel it in here energetically in my heart, chest area, and even in my third. And then, so there's a tension in there, and I can feel part of me going up to the head to try to solve that and assuage that anxiety by coming up with ideas of what else could we do to bring more income in or to do that. And so that it goes from down here in the body to up here in the head, and then it's not landing anywhere here in the heart. So then it's taking a moment to really just like breathe, and actually it's almost like a pattern interrupt, where you're stopping that sort of flow from here to the, the anxiety to the head, and you
The doing response.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's assuaging that anxiety, but then stopping and sitting still and breathing, and then just allowing stillness and even contact with, I can feel the part of me, I've been in contact with the part of me that I know that is holding the tension of things around income, as an example.
Yeah.
And then just rather than trying to solve it, it's feel it. It's like, let's feel the tension together. Let's feel the tears.
Even you mentioned going into his world, this part.
Mhm.
And then how is he, we do this a lot in our sessions. Like what is this part seeing as your world? So they often show you very clear pictures of, and the emotions as well. Maybe it's you've had this. We just did a process with a toll booth.
Right.
Part of you showed us a toll booth that he was living in,
Right.
which was quite small, for the bigness of your life and your soul. But for this part, that's how he was relating. I think there's an exchange, there's a transaction. We got to pay.
Yes.
It's got to be a
Ding ding.
yeah.
Yeah. So even in that visual, the visual shows the constriction, just him being in that tiny little toll booth box. It's an example, a visual example of the energetic feeling of being constricted. And then so like helping him come out of the toll booth and into this wider field, sort of a meadow or whatever it is that he feels brings in more air, then all of a sudden it's like there's this visual of a wider place, a sequoia grove or a redwood grove and all these things, possibilities. Then it's like, then that part feels a bit more space. And so it's that area, it's, let's say the redwood grove, it's that spaciousness that is the divine self. It is the one that's holding all of that, the place for the feeling, whatever it is, the fear, tears that get to come through, that need to fall through. It's also the feeling of spaciousness, that things aren't as bad as they seem.
Yeah.
But it's still holding space. It's not even judging the tears of feeling scared. So where does that come from? Then I remember, even in that aspect, I remember then going to the soul at one point in a meditation, going into the soul and feeling like an aspect of me just underneath a bridge had lost everything. And so that's never happened in my life. So now I'm tapping into some sort of like fourth dimensional, soul aspect that is like vibrating in the soul field.
Yes.
That's then it's vibrating my like inner protector, inner father kind of energy here. And so it all kind of comes downstream. And so there's that shows sort of the wide range of what's going on here. It's not just
all of that came through this portal of feeling like, oh, I need to get more classes. I need to. So that's, I think, a big difference too, is that rather than we don't try to get rid of or fix the feeling or the reaction or the trigger, we go into it in this way of going inward. And one of the things that's come through a lot in the last months is this idea of a home field, this sense, not just an idea. It's a sense of a home field that is held by divine energy, by divine mother, by divine father, by your divine self. So that's what you're describing. You know, if you go in through the portal of an anxiety or a tension or a reaction, and then you're going into the home field to see, where is this part that feels the anxiety or tension? Are they in the house? Are they out of the house? Are they in a toll booth? Are they up on a hill? Are they in the mountain? You know, it's amazing. It's a very, very simple setup that's come over years and many, many sessions, that feels like we're refining something here to the point where in a 20-minute meditation, so this is something we offer on our YouTube channel, a home field meditation that I did that's very simple. Just some sound frequencies that I've been working with that are supportive, and then a gentle guided meditation where you're just opening up really this home field within you, where all of these parts can be held, where the divine can come through in whatever forms. And obviously in a session, then we're there to guide you in that. We ask questions, we might use our intuition. I feel something over here. What is this? What do you see? But you can, and it's important that you open that out yourself too.
Right. Yeah. I think I was reminded of, when you were speaking, I was reminded of the movie Inside Out, which is a great, it's a kid's movie, but it's not. It's a fantastic example of what we would call parts. It doesn't bring into the soul, but it does show you this sort of like differentiation between these things. And I remember, I think it was the second one about the anxiety part, and it was stuck. I remember that one scene where this anxiety part was like stuck in a loop, and it was just like, and it was in this field. And yet, and then we think, when we go into these parts, like I don't want to go into that field, and we're not going into that anxiety field. We're actually taking that part, that little part reaction, and we're bringing it into the home field so that we can help unwind it and feel it. So what I had done in that moment is I felt the tension, went to the tension, I didn't necessarily go into the tension. I brought the tension into the home field. And then when you bring that into the home field, something else happens. Like there's a widening effect that happens, and you can get more breathing in that. And I think that's where we get stuck sometimes, especially in therapy, as an example. We get caught in the anxiety. We're like, get caught like looping
analyzing
around. Right. And it's just this big sort of, kind of big ping-ponging effect within the field, rather than taking that to the divine self or to the home field, where it's something gets to open up.
And I do feel that you need a frequency of that. As example, a template, a transmission, that's the meditations, or obviously in the one-on-one work or the groups. And I am feeling with this podcast, I would like to have one of you do a drop-in into a part, and feeling the home field together and opening that out, so you can get a visceral feeling of it.
Yeah.
Because it is an altered consciousness, even from where we are right now, where we're talking about all of this. If you even drop in the moment, you've been taking a whole half an hour of a lot of good stuff mentally, but if you even drop in the moment and just take a moment to feel, if you feel any emotions coming up from this, or even in body sensation, is another really good portal to a part, because they live in different parts of our body and different chakras, energy centers as well. So you might even be feeling like maybe there's a discomfort in your stomach, or there's a feeling of ache, or maybe you're already having tears and you don't really understand why. Just something Gabriel said, or energized, or me, or just being in our field that we live in as our way of life is stirring something. So even in this moment, there's this opportunity. You could even pause or come back to this, and but go, even in this moment, going inward into that, and just asking, even, is there a part of me that is connected to this feeling or this body sensation, or just needs there to be a bigger me right now than there currently is and access to? Do you feel anything as you tune in here for a moment? You felt an
It's
exhale.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of just like what I said earlier about even when we're having conversations, sometimes you'll just say, I just feel like we're getting a little mental. And again, there's no judgment, but just to sit for a second and to not think, but just to allow sensation.
As you do that, Gabriel, you just tune in a deeper place here. What do you feel from your heart and your body that you want to say and share? What's like the heart of it for you?
The heart of
The
the
process,
process.
the your experience.
To me, it's over time, it's been more about dropping into the heart, into the body. It's listening to what's being said, not so much in words, but in energy. And sometimes that just takes time. And I think we can get so wrapped up in talking about it, which is important because you're wanting to put out a framework and an understanding and all that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, in our day-to-day life, it is about just the feeling, the sensation, whether it's a throat thing or a chest tightening or a gut thing, or maybe there's something else in the shoulders, anything that the body is saying,
Yeah.
trying to, that's the expression. And then from there, just sort of sensing, like, even if I can feel myself walking into this, there's a sense of like, obviously we're up in the head just to talk, and then just even speak
Something, it
slower.
feels like something just
Right.
relaxed
You
there.
can just, even by putting your hand on your heart and taking a few breaths, you can just all of a sudden notice a vibrational difference.
I think that's also why the transmissive elements, even in a session, will play as a crystal bowl or chimes, and then just drop, because you're dropping, and actually it's a somatic drop too. It's a body drop as well. So a lot of people also will say after sessions that they feel more present. I think you said that, more in their body than they did before. So it's not going up and out in an activated kind of way, but it's going in. And
Right.
yeah.
What's cool about, even just doing these podcasts, these are things that we can prepare for to some degree. We have some bullet points that we wanted to talk about.
I don't know if we covered anything.
But then they get us going, and then the mind starts us to go. And then as we move through it, just being in the moment of feeling like, I could feel myself just kind of like a little heightened something or other inside of my chest, or even being a little bit more in the head.
Yeah.
And recognizing that that's not really the bulk of this whole work. It's actually the bulk of it's in the heart. And then how do you transmit that? And I guess the only way you do that is just by getting real in the space. That is really what it's all about.
And it'll be interesting. So there's doing this together, and then there's both of us. This is an example of how we live this as our way of life, digesting this afterwards. And you might even share with me, I felt a part of me that was up at the beginning, and then it started relaxing, and or even how we digest, how we want to present this or be in this. It will be digested, because I think that's another really big thing too. It isn't just the production or the doing, or the fixing or the solving, but we actually relish digesting things, which is the part that most skip over. So there's the going to the spiritual event or thing, for example, or doing the session, but the actual digestion and integration is often missing. So that's part of the, I think, hamster wheel,
right,
of spirituality
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. And the realization that embodiment and self is not just like a thunk and I'm here.
Right.
To me, it is a journey. It is a process of embodiment. It's ongoing. And
Through the willingness to feel
Mhm.
not just the parts, but your own body. Like one thing I work with women is really having a relationship with their womb that's very rich and real to them, and isn't just, oh, I got my period again, or oh, I have menopause, or oh, this the way that the 3D medicine looks at the body, but is a much richer feeling. And that's when the womb wisdom opens up. And I think it's the same for men with their hara, their sacral solar plexus center. There's real relationship, and there in that relationship sometimes there's naming, there's definitely naming of the parts. They like having names and being known, but also, even I have my womb's name is Sophia, for divine feminine wisdom. And as soon as you name something and have a relationship with it that way, that also supports integration and digestion and embodiment.
Mhm. Yes. And I know we wanted to make the point too about the outside in thing around the divine.
Yeah.
That it's not an outside
And I
thing.
think that's when we talk about the home field. So in some of my most of my meditations, you're going into your home field, but then, which is usually represented by some kind of house or cottage or structure, whatever fits you, whatever comes forward. And then it's also connected to Divine Mother's garden, because that is the way that I've typically experienced Divine Mother's setting, if you will.
Mhm.
And then Divine Father is often a grove or trees, or so even in this we're saying there's an internal field here of divine frequencies that you can connect with and deepen, that isn't just about going outward, obviously in prayer or to the church or a middleman, but is accessible and embodying. Whenever you're creating space for a part of you, there's a divine energy in you that's doing that, it's being in that.
Right.
And what would you say about that piece?
Yeah, I think there's always been, I think it's just a conditioning that somehow the divine is outside of us solely. And that whole thing, before even starting the process of that feeling of connecting with a larger consciousness or an intelligence or a presence, it was always sort of like, please God, help me get rid of this anxiety. I can't, I don't know what to do anymore. So it's always that, this sort of externalization. And I think that's beneficial.
Can the Lord speak through me through this anxiety?
Yeah.
Or help me deal with this situation?
Right. And I think just to have that alone I feels like a grace too. But then also to recognize when you go into the home field and you're going inside, that the divine is there too. I mean, it's everywhere. It's outside, it's inside. But to meet it inside is really quite extraordinary, and it really brings that feeling of grace. Really just moves through. I remember having some very challenging periods, a few years ago, where I separated from the community for a time. And I had, I was pretty much on my own. And so I had this really rich kind of like falling into Divine Mother, because there was a lot of fear that was coming up around it all. And so I could meet her on the inside, and just feeling being held by that.
Really internalized during that period too.
Right.
And individuated.
Yeah. And it became my connection. It wasn't through you or through anybody else, but it was my own personal relationship with Divine Mother that can't ever go away. It can't go away, even no matter what happens in any configuration from here on out. That's still something that's going to live inside of me forever and ever.
That's a big piece of the embodiment, right? Is that's
right.
the case.
Right. It can't leave. That's a good point. Like, it just can't leave you. So kind of like, no matter where you go, there you are, kind of thing. No matter where you go, there she is. No matter where you go, there he is. Divine Mother and Father. Divine is there, not outside, but also inside. And you're walking with it,
and that
with them.
kind of what's so beautiful is that just kind of naturally occurs when you're, again, being with a part of you that's anxious. There's got to be some energy in you that's trusting. So you're drawing this trust in, and you're drawing it from your divine field to give this part some trust, or be a bigger presence, or just for, I'm here for you, I'm here, so that they're no longer alone. And as you do that over enough time, and it's not even a practice, it just becomes your way of relating to these parts of yourself, and any reaction or trigger that you have, your divine self grows and does become more embodied. It's organic. I really feel that.
Yeah.
And it's always felt very important to me that others feel their divine connection and their embodiment. So that's what I'm supporting, even if they can feel in me a certain degree of divine mother energies as a template. That's great. But every soul is so unique in how they express that, and everyone has that access if they're meant to access it.
When you're saying, like, even just by saying, I am alone, if you're saying that to yourself, and without any of the context, you're just you're just in aloneness, the actual field of aloneness, rather than when you say, I am alone, and you can just, by even saying something like a question like, why do you feel alone? But all of a sudden you've just shifted something completely. You've just decided that the I am alone, the words I am alone is not all of you, it's just a part of you. And by asking the question, well, why do you feel alone? And all of a sudden you've created a duality in that sense of aloneness. And now and then, well, I don't know what the next words are, it's like, I feel alone. And then all of a sudden you're rolling out that conversation. Now you've created a back and forth.
Yes.
And then you get to know who is I am alone? Who is feeling that? Where are they? Where are you? And then all of a sudden, just by asking those questions, you open up a whole new architecture that's going on. And now all of a sudden the I am alone is now in relationship to an other. And that other is just something that you don't even know. I don't know. Am I making this shit up? Am I lost my mind?
Becoming a loving voice that can say, why do you feel alone? And you're not alone.
Right.
I'm here.
You're just the loving awareness in the field. And that is the divine self to me. It is the loving awareness. And you take on the divine self in that moment. You become the parent, you become the friend, you become the brother, the sister, whatever you are, you become relational to the I am alone. I am hurting, I am afraid, whatever
What's
those
interesting, what I've seen in sessions too, is that maybe I'm that voice, or I'm that question in the beginning, and then the person's soul activates, and the divine within them activates, and then they become that, and then the whole room, if you will, expands. And then they also sometimes can see, well, I'm not alone at all, even in the most traumatic, dark time. Whoa, look at the guides that were there, the protector part that was there, the divine that was there. And in that moment, there's healing. And it can be really profound healing. Just opens the space through the heart. And that is my favorite moments, of course. That's why we're in this. And when you can offer that to yourself, then you just organically start offering that to others as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that it is challenging to do that. I think you highlighted the fact that in session space there is that it's kind of a modeling of that. Like we kind of holding that
for yourself right away is not, I don't think, realistic for most people.
Yes, because it still gets kind of challenging because you're still in something, but it's an example. I'm just trying to bring an example of what that's like. And so we kind of hold the space for that sort of like loving awareness that you can start to be modeled from. And then you start taking on that in between sessions. You take on that loving awareness And in the next session, we can feel that loving awareness grows and grows and grows over time. And all of a sudden, you're not just fused to the aloneness or the fear or the anger or the whatever it is that you're feeling. You become another part of its holding. You become the holding field.
Yeah. That look might be okay. I think we're done now. I really love where that went. I know that I want to do a podcast. Maybe Kasha's going to join me next, and we talk more about how this translates into relationships. What we're talking about here of this self relationality, and then
this is self to self. Yeah, we're talking about.
Yeah, and how it's quite profound and interesting and challenging in some ways, how this then translates into relationship, which is what so many souls care about, where they're being initiated. So there is a very direct correlation here. And this is a beautiful start.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel good about
I like that
the
idea.
intention.
Right. Because we've talked about, this triad of self to self, self to other, self to the divine. And in each one of those, there's the self. But today, I think that was a good introduction into that self to self piece, which to me is like so essential. That self to self, self-care, self-healing. It doesn't mean that you're doing it all by yourself. It's still in relationship, but it's like learning how to be in relationship to yourself.
It's a different and unique way of relating to the self, though, that can bring a lot of space and air and digestion and love flow. And I think we really made that point today. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for coming up from downstairs to join me.
Up from the basement.
Yes. And we will see you next time.
Take care. See you soon.